to do, partly because you're in a US business and we have a lot of global subscribers, is to kind of explain the breadth of the Curaleaf business as well as you can in terms of all the areas it operates in and also all of the different product categories.
Sure. So when you take a step back, you've got Curaleaf, which is our retail brand. Currently 89 stores. We are licensed to be up to 140, and we think we will achieve that by the end of next year. Within those stores, we sell our brand Select, and that brand Select is also wholesaled to over 1,400 dispensaries across the country. We are active in 23 states. We access over 2/3 of the country's population, and we are the largest cannabis provider, but as I like to say, we're the largest provider of consumer products in cannabis. That's really what our company is focused on, and making sure we provide great consumer products to consumers in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, so does what you sell differ based on kind of what the current state of the law is in all of these different states, or how does that map out? And then if you could explain what the legislative roadmap looks like in the US, since it's a state by state affair.
Sure. There are some states, for example, on the East Coast, which is highly medicinal. There are states that don't allow edibles. There are states that didn't allow vape. You're seeing this change over time, but it's really a process of opening up these markets, and we make products based on how that market is being opened. And we've helped write legislation so people can understand what is safe dosing, or so they can understand why edibles or concentrates are perfectly fine for the consumer. And it doesn't mean you're a wreck market because you provide another alternative to a patient who may not want to smoke something or may have a lung condition. So we try to be at the table to help legislators understand that we're not just trying to change the rules to make more money. Like this is a consumer product, and people need different alternatives based on the conditions they have. And as you go out to the West Coast, based on the preferences they have, where it is, adult use and where they are called quote unquote recreational markets, we're still very much involved in helping understand what is the right legislation.
What's the branding challenge with all of that? Because I remember last time we talked, for instance, in Florida, they don't call gummies gummies, they call them something else. And
which
every time,
changed, by the way.
It has changed. Okay, good.
Changed.
But every time you cross a state border, it seems that you've got sort of something else thrown in the works that makes it difficult to communicate what the brand is, because it's not quite the same as it is on the other side of the state line.
Yeah. Well, we have taken on the very difficult, and I would say very admirable task of trying to create national brands. We are committed to providing brands that cross state lines with an experience and a level of trust and a level of consumer awareness that patients and customers can count on. That is very important. That is why brands exist. And for us, that means we've taken on the task of the issues of variability, the issues of different laws. And the example you gave is a great one. In Florida, we had to call anything edible a sublingual tablet, and it was meant to be put under the tongue. They have now since passed legislation and put in the right rules for edibles. So now you can call them edibles, but you still can't call them gummies. So what we've done though is we've started with understanding the values of the brand, understanding what the brand's committed to, and then understanding how products deliver on a brand promise, and then really building from there. So we will not make a product in a state that, even if it's a great market opportunity, that doesn't align to that brand's portfolio and that brand's values and that brand's vision, then we will maybe put that in a different brand, or we'll maybe hold off until we think that there's a better time in the marketplace where the brand has evolved to have that type of product in its portfolio. We spend a lot of time thinking through the assortment and the portfolio that applies to our 3 different brands.
Yeah, this year has been interesting for everybody. I guess that's one way to put it, right? But it seems like your brand intersected with all of these different things going on. There's health and wellness. There's Black Lives Matter. There's other things that are very tactical, like the rise in e-commerce, or how to change how you operate as a retailer, given that people are a little scared to go into retail
You're
establishments.
making me cringe, Kathy.
So sorry. So what are your perspectives on this year, given that you kind of had to wrestle with all of those things?
Yeah. I guess the answer is we had to do all of it. You're absolutely right. And every time we faced adversity, another department had to step up. When George Floyd happened, that was CSR. That was like, how do we make sure our values are aligned around this? How do we make sure we're moving forward with social equity? When COVID first hit, it was, how do we change our resourcing, change the flighting of how we staff our stores? How do we keep our patients safe? How do we keep our employees safe? How do we move to curbside? How do we move to delivery? How do we make sure our website is, able to handle the traffic? So totally different team there. And then, our brand team was, how do you still communicate with consumers when everyone is staying home, when everyone has real heaviness on their mind and on their hearts? How do you still, provide value to consumers? So every aspect of our business was challenged this year. And I think we did well. I can honestly say that. I think we pivoted in really strong ways. And we just had an offsite with our leadership team in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and we started off by saying, what are we good at, and what do we need to work on? And one of the first thif someone said when we asked what are we good at was like, this company knows how to pivot. This company really knows how to pivot. And if we didn't learn that this year, then we didn't learn anything.
We've talked a lot, and many marketers have said this too, about just how fast they had to move this year. And has that really continued? I mean, what sort of things as a company have you had to kind of keep doing, even though we've sort of unfortunately assimilated the fact that we're in a pandemic for a while and all those kinds of things?
Well, I think the biggest one that comes to mind is, as an essential service, we were in charge of continuing to innovate, continuing to put the products in our consumers' hands. We commercialized 62 products this year in the middle of a pandemic. And that included some really big innovative platforms, like launching our nano emulsion platform, which changed the speed of a gummy onset from 30 to 60 minutes to 15 minutes. We launched our live resin product in over, I think, 13 markets. So we had a lot to do. And, these are still very competitive states, and especially on the West Coast, this game waits for no one. So we were still ramping our product launches. We were still ramping our ability to commercialize. We're way faster now than we were 6 months ago. We're way more integrated now in terms of how you marketplace, from CRM to above the line to, influencers, and, making sure that the story is right. And, we've had to get better as we've had to deal with more and more changes through the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, one thing that would be good to walk through again was we were talking about, you were, I think when you first joined in February, right?
Yep.
Talking about really working on what your mission was. And then Black Lives Matter gets sort of elevated, unfortunately, because of, George Floyd's death. And you were sort of well positioned for that in a strange way. And I'd just love for you to kind of walk back through that, how that all unfolded for the company.
We were kind of chugging along, got through the pandemic, and we actually leaned on our mission statement, which is to improve lives by providing clarity around cannabis and confidence around consumption. It's really about the confidence that we put into our products around safety and dosing and measurement and communication and clarity. That's what gives consumers the confidence to, have their daily triumphs and their daily wins. And, as we were telling our own store associates, this is what we mean when we say improve lives. Like, this is why we've got to be there, so we can give, cannabis with confidence, which is the line that we use. And, that was a way to really rally everyone around a moment and a movement to make sure we show up for our customers. Then George Floyd happened. And then the question was, well, hey, biggest cannabis company in the world, what are you doing about it? And I think there was, if I'm very honest, there were mixed emotions about what we should do. And I think a lot of people felt that because we didn't just speak up immediately,
Mhm.
that we had failed this movement. And, I can tell you very personally, as a Black and Cuban man who's sitting in the C-suite of this company, it was very, very personal to me. And
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to have the visibility to what we were doing behind the scenes and the bigger road that we had decided to go down. And that was about, let's build real institutional change, and let's use our resources, our dollars, our connections, and let's try to go do that. And that's not going to be ready in time for a tweet around
Yeah.
George Floyd. So we were silent, and we took some heat for that. And here we are, 5 months later, 4 months later, and I can tell you that we're on the brink of rolling out a really fantastic program, one that's focused on Black-owned dispensaries, one that's focused on female Latinx and Black-owned brands on our shelves in our stores, one that's focused on doing collaborations with Black-owned businesses. So we've walked that journey of critique, if you will, if I'm honest,
Yeah.
and we've come out on the other side where we're going to let our actions do our speaking, and we're excited about what Khadija and the team have pulled together and how we're going to put this into the world. And so much of this is, and rightly so, it was a call to action for so many, right? And even the Nikes of the world who put big money on the table were still criticized. Where's this money going? Is it really Black-owned businesses? Everything that's happened. And I think for us, it was just another indicator of like, let's do this right. Let's really take the time and do this right, and put something out in the world that we can be proud of, and that first and foremost we can turn to our own employees and say, yeah, this is what we have been spending our time on.
A lot of brands were sort of caught flat-footed by all of the protests. They knew they should be doing things, etc. And that applies to all sorts of different missions. And they're just not ready, and they don't know where to start. And their corporate mission, whatever it is, was not sort of prepared for this moment. And this year, the way that some other brands were. So if you haven't gotten that groundwork ready yet, like what would be your advice to brands who are a few paces behind you guys?
Put aside the new climate that we all live in. If you want to be a successful business overall, you have to understand your values. You have to understand what is your North Star, what is your mission statement. I've been very fortunate to work on very big global brands that are also like challenger brands at heart. They know who they are, right? And that's always stuck with me. And I've worked through a lot of different crises with athletes, musicians, moments in time, earthquakes in China, everything. And I learned by being an agency to brands that said, we know who we are, we know what this moment means, and we know how to move forward. So my advice to anyone that's managing the marketing of, and especially in an emerging market like this, you gotta put it to paper, and you gotta understand who you are and what you stand for. And I would also say you've got to do it in a way that gives you some flexibility, because these things change every single day, and you want to know that you have a broad enough belief in who you are and a broad enough set of values that you can compete, right? You can maneuver and adjust and pivot, but at the same time, at your core, those fundamentals, they need to be there.
Yeah. So have you had to switch things up in terms of messaging this year, and also in terms of media channels?
Well, I think from a messaging standpoint, this was a year where we were going to come out and launch all these great products in Q1 and Q2, and then cut to March 13th. And, the world didn't care about a new product you had to offer. The world cared about safety, security, provisions. So we immediately, first we went dark, and we just let our business run. And we communicated that we are open and we are here for you, and we are safe, right? That was the core message. And then, from there, especially on the Select brand, Select is about the relentless pursuit of progress. But Select is also a lifestyle brand, and it's about how you enjoy cannabis in ways that aren't quite so heavy, And I thought the team did a phenomenal job of getting back on social and being relevant. like they gave away a couch one day because it was like, since we're all staying at home to be safe and to help one another out, we're going to give away a couch. There were days when they had love drops, they called them, where it was like just showing up and helping wholesale partners, dispensaries that we don't own, and just showing up and saying thank you, food, lunch, gifts, merch, masks, everything. So that was a big shift, even in those kind of 2 months, going from March 13th to where we were in April. And 420, we were sponsoring a concert that was a stay-at-home concert, safe at home, with Weed Maps and some other partners. So there's been a lot of really fascinating pivots along the way, and we've been very close to our messaging, very close to how we've had to adjust. And then I think as we went into the summertime, we really started launching serious products that are really innovative, and we had to get back to speaking to product attributes. We had to get back to explaining to people like what nano emulsion means. That's not an everyday term that you
No, it's not.
And I think what was a great exercise for our team was understanding channel management, right? To your point, understanding, we maintained our audience in our customer conversation through CRM. We really used our email database very regularly, because we knew that while people aren't looking for, some big branded idea from a brand, they want to know, like, what do you have in stock? What do you have in store? Like, am I going to walk out of my house to show up to an empty store, or like, what's available? So we did a lot of communication through email, continuing to make sure people understood, what value we could provide for them in the middle of this moment. And then once we really had product launches to put out, that's when we went back and started to come back into using programmatic. We started using print in some bigger ways. We started really working with more mainstream platforms and going sort of to quote unquote above the line.
Did you see any differences in channels during the course of the pandemic that made you kind of switch that up? Like, for instance, and I don't know that you do any TV, but there was a big jump up in connected TV as the pandemic unfolded. And we heard that from a whole bunch of marketers.
Yeah.
So what did you see, and how did you adjust?
We are still in the world of startup. We are still raising money multiple times, and we do a great job of that. We have incredible investors, but for us, it was like, well, cash is king. Let's turn this off. Let's turn this machine off. Let's communicate through our direct channels and CRM and make sure that people understood that there was product on shelves. You could go to delivery, you could go to curbside, come to the new website. So that all had to happen. But other than that, we were like, cash is king. Let's conserve cash. Let's see where this pandemic goes. There's a lot of choices we're going to have to make as an organization, and we want to make sure we have optionality as this thing plays out.
So what has surprised you the most about consumer behavior change during the course of these last 7 months?
I think people have realized we don't need as much stuff. And I think that's a great realization. I think people are craving connectivity. They are craving tools and objects and things that make you feel better, that make you feel more connected, that make you feel comforted and safe. And it's less about, what you're going to wear when you walk into a restaurant, or what you're going to drive, or these things that, have been such big drivers of consumerism. I think we're seeing a huge shift into kind of, the value of those things, not to mention, like, you're at home, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Boots around the house, Now, that said, I think we're going to see pendulum swing the other way. I think once this pandemic lifts, and once people are going to be so excited to go out and connect, and I think people are going to strut their stuff, and I think you're going to see a real turn back towards spending on luxury and fashion and consumer goods that aren't necessarily considered to be essential consumer goods. But I think right now there was a real nice, this is a nice window of a bit of humanity,
Yeah.
But if I know us, that's going to change.
One thing that we realize about the election, no matter how it goes, is this will still be a very polarized country, no matter what.
Yeah.
And for marketers, that has been and will continue to be attention. And I wondered what your thoughts were on the role a marketer needs to play at a time when Oreos does an ad that features two women in love, and then all of a sudden all these people are boycotting Oreos. So it's just very hard to be in a situation where you have to come down on one side or another, it feels like, so much of the time.
There are degrees of picking sides. There are degrees of kind of value-based decisions.
Mhm.
And I think this is a time where the country is very, very divided. And I think there are some brands that sit in categories and spaces where you have to address that divide. You know, I think there are also brands that sit on the iconic level of culture where they also have to make a decision. If you've represented the underdog, or if you've represented the compromised side of culture for a long, long time, then you kind of need to represent them now. You know, I think that it's such a unique situation, and one that, you know, I would never judge another marketer for how they make that decision of how they want to, you know, manage that process. As a guy that worked for Apple, like, you know, laptops are not red or blue. You know, laptops are helping people live their lives, save their lives, monitor their health. There was so much that, like, you can't decide like who you're for, who you're against. Now, when you start getting into topics like hatred and abuse and things that are not red or blue, but just inhuman, I think that's where we all need to have a point of view, and we all need to speak up and to speak out and not make people do it alone. You know, I was very proud of the Select brand when the George Floyd moment happened. We did say something. We said, you know, for far too long, this has been the burden of too few. And, you know, I don't think that was about picking sides or you know, anything but just speaking the truth about the moment that happened, and people that, you know, finally were getting help to deal with the problem. And I think the election is very similar. You know, it's, for us, like, we're not picking a side. For us, it's now what we will say is use your right to vote. I mean,
Yeah.
there's never a time to speak up and be represented and stand for the values that you stand for. This is it. Like, get out there. But, you know, Americans are going to feel what they're going to feel, and you know, we're just trying to make sure, specifically from our business, you know, these are serious issues in terms of health and you know, for all the conditions that people use cannabis, and we don't choose whether you get to have cannabis or not.
Yeah.
We're hoping that wherever these decisions go, it's going to be about providing people access to the plant.